Love at the End of the World. After drawing the Shipwright and his wife together, I found that I couldn't just move on. While the story isn't officially written yet, I know that their relationship will be a major influence on it. There are countless fun things yet to design, but I think that spending time fleshing out this marriage will be time well spent. In this first image, it's early morning. The sunrise is just shining through a gap in the mountains. The Shipwright has risen early to get a start on another day packed with grueling preparations. He decided not to wake Nama. She's been working long hours too, and when he can, he likes to give her any extra rest possible. He takes a moment to look out over his valley. It's been his home for centuries. He knows and loves every field, hill, mountain, every bend in the river, and he knows that soon his family's memory of this place will be all that's left of it. I've been using this series of images as an excuse to brush up on my 3D skills. At this early stage, I'm using simple hand-drawn textures in an attempt to make the models look reasonably like something I drew. This isn't a big leap from my usual approach of making 3D models to use as architectural sketches. I'm sure everyone who has learned 3D can confirm it's a process of building until you hit a wall, then looking up and trying solutions to accomplish something that would take an expert 2 button clicks. Then you repeat that step about 30 times. Needless to say, building these scenes in 3D did not save me any time, but that's the cost you have to pay so that eventually it becomes time-saving. For Nama's blanket, I wasn't totally sold on the original sketch. Drapery works on very simple principles. Fabric is affected by gravity, so it hangs from whatever supports it and is affected by all the other fabric it's connected to. But like all simple principles, actual application can get complicated. My first sketch worked generally, but I wanted to get a bit more specific, so I found a bit of reference material to pull from. I've given Nama some incredibly long hair. This is partly to hint at her centuries of age. To avoid her getting tangled up in it as she sleeps, I had a bit of a struggle designing a gigantic rolled-up bun. When it comes to drawing characters, I have to think systemically. Anytime I attempt to just draw a final clothed character, I run into dozens of anatomical problems. To avoid this, I start at the foundations of the skeleton and then work up layer by layer, from muscles and skin to clothing. That way, even though most of the drawing is never seen in the final image, it has a better chance of feeling right. As the inking stage plays out, I'll explain the leap in the background. First, I wanted to install some blinds, but I figured I'd just draw them by hand. Somewhere along the lines, while watching another tutorial to solve an entirely different problem, I learned how to create textures with transparency. The advantage of this is that by turning my drawing into a 3D prop, the blinds could now cast shadows. That saves a ton of painting time later on, which really equates to a lot of exasperating problem solving. I also wasn't a fan of my first pass at the vista. I made some simple 3D landscape mountains. They were a terrible drain on memory, which made working with the scene incredibly tedious. This would be a cost I'd willingly pay for mountains that looked great, but the originals did not look great. Instead, I just photo-bashed something together. I've given myself a reasonable but tight schedule of trying to get a video out every week. A background like this served my purposes just fine, because another thing I wanted was more control over the foreground and background layers. I wanted to be able to push those mountains further out with atmospheric dispersion, or haze. I put a huge green screen out in the distance and rendered it out to use as a mask. That way I could add as much fog as the image needed to make sure the silhouettes read clearly. That's one of my highest priorities in all of these images, clear silhouettes, because shape is one of the most important ways that the story is delivered to our brains. With all of my base colors in and my background layers in place, I could move on to the stone balancing portion, where I push and pull color and light until it clicks. I painted the shadows of the blinds onto the Shipwright, using the render as a guide. I added a few highlights to Nama's hair and the Shipwright's century cuffs. And with some final color correction, I had an image that I felt worked. They're never really done, but the perfect is the enemy of the good, and you have to give yourself permission to stop. The best marker for when to stop is, does it tell the story that you intended? Thankfully, I reached the point where I thought this did a decent job of portraying the peaceful early moments of their day. For the next image, I built a small storage section of the Ark. This is where they've been stockpiling food for almost 100 years. They'll need it for themselves and the animals they'll be taking with them, but not just for their journey. When the water recedes and they finally depart the ship, there's no telling what condition the world will be in, or how long it will take to get things planted and growing. They really will be starting from scratch. They'll need enough provisions to survive for years in the unknown. It's in this setting that the shipwright and his wife take a brief moment of reprieve. He's been out for weeks hewing and transporting more trees, in between fighting off predators and bandits on the edge of their territory. She's been harvesting, preserving, and packing more provisions. They're both exhausted, leaning against each other for support, both thanking God, knowing they couldn't do this without each other. One note on their costumes: to show that they're both at the end of a long stretch of work, they've both girded their loins. When people prepare for battle or hard work, it literally means tucking your robe up between your legs and tying it in a knot to give you better freedom of movement. It took a bit of thinking to figure out the specifics of how the drapery would work in these poses, but I think it worked out pretty well. I drew the shipwright's axe to place into the image. In the sketch, he's holding it in the way you'd usually expect, but as images go along, you come across bumps in the road. When I tried to place it how I had originally intended, at the proper scale, the pointy end looked distractingly close to Nama. If she dropped her arm, it would land right on the tip. I tried a few other orientations, and reversing it not only worked, but I think worked better. Dragging it on its edge makes it look still intentional, but it also reflects just how tired he is. While we watch the line work stage play out, I want to thank all my subscribers on Patreon. Your support is helping me to focus even more on developing this project. My Dragon Tier patrons here get their names in the videos, and they get to vote on certain aspects of Dead Gods. They get access to a Discord server, along with the Sabertooth tier. Things are growing, and I'm excited to see what shapes it'll take as time goes on. Also, if you go to my website, mattrhodesart.com, you can find all my social media accounts where I post more work than just Dead Gods, and I've also put up books, prints, and artwork from the last 20 years. Now, onto color. I wanted the couple to be silhouetted against the brighter background, so I darkened them and added a bit more light bouncing around behind them. Finally, I added the reflections on the hair and metal, painted in their shadows on the floor, and gave them both some droplets of sweat to underline their exhaustion. For the final image, after I'd slept on it, I realized I wasn't happy with the size of their heads. They both have heroic proportions. He's 7.5 feet tall, she's 7 feet, but I'd pushed it a little too far. So my finishing touch was to increase the sides of their heads a little bit. They still have heroic proportions, they just look a little more correct. And with that, we have the shipwright and his wife leaning on each other after a long stretch of hard preparations. Finally, a scene in the old war room. It's been almost 100 years of hard labor to finish this massive project. In the rare moments of rest, the weight of it all can sink in. The shipwright was contemplating the past, the future, and the high cost of obedience. His family's fate, and through them all of humanity's, rests in God's hands. But while it's God that swings the axe, the shipwright is still the blade getting stuck in the wood. It takes a heavy toll. In darker moments like this, Nama knows that while words often fall short, she is able to remind him of who he is in a way that only a loving wife can. I ran the idea of this image by my own wife, a virtuous character. My goal is to tastefully imply the beauty, intimacy, and character of a loving marriage, without crossing the lines into gratuitous territory. If this were a movie, we'd be fading to black just after this moment. My wife gave it her enthusiastic seal of approval, agreeing that it portrayed a very real moment between a healthy husband and wife. The shipwright's expression was the key to this entire image. A second ago, he was holding his heavy head in his hand, as Nama's robes hit the floor and he beheld what is so poetically described later in the primary text in Song of Songs. All of his heavy thoughts evaporated. In fact, so many thoughts evaporated that his fingers forgot their grip on his cup of wine. A quick note on the environment. In case it's not obvious, the little mountain range on the floor is a scale model of their valley. From here, he was once able to strategize defenses with his generals, plot grazing routes with his shepherds, plan expansions with his engineers, and map out trade routes with his caravans. For the color stage, you'll see the old familiar pushing and pulling, adding shadows and reflections, using light and shadow to create more separation between elements to keep the silhouettes reading clearly. I added a bit of reflection to the stones to provide a bit more texture, And when it came to color grading, I used it to enhance the storytelling by making the Shipwright side of the image a little cooler, while Nama is on the warmer side. So there we have it. Nama has found the man she loves, stuck under a dark cloud of grim contemplation, and she comes to his rescue in a way that only she can. Thanks for watching, everyone. There are a few more images I'd still like to make of these two, so stay tuned and see you next time.